We've got worker freedom in Darien. It's a great story, and it's becoming more and more common story out there, thankfully, but the battle goes on, of course. Transportation employees at Americold Logistics in Darien recently won a decertification effort against a Teamsters union. It's another victory for the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation and worker freedom. Mark Mix, our old friend, president of the National Right to Work Committee, a 2.8 million member public policy organization, joins us now on the Middleton Ford Hotline, family owned and your good neighbor Ford dealership for nearly 75 years. Good afternoon, sir. It's been a while. Glad to have you here with us.
Has been, Matt, but neither, we're not old friends. We're young friends, right? I mean,
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a certain age. Like to correct that as quickly as possible. You're right, but we have known each other for quite a few years, and I do know the good work that you and your colleagues have done for such a long time. This is the latest example. Break this one down, because this comes on the heels, as I understand it, of another big victory in Wisconsin not too long ago as well.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. This is workers getting in hold of us and trying to exercise their rights to get rid of a union. It's very easy to get into one. It's very difficult to get out, and the law and the regulations are stacked against individual workers. And this is just another example of an ongoing and a growing number of cases and people that we're helping across the country, including Wisconsin. And you're right, this one on behalf of 53 employees at Americold Logistics in Darien, they contacted us asking for help to try to decertify the union, which means to throw the union out of their workplace, in this case the Teamsters. And they had a majority of the workers in that unit sign a petition saying they wanted to have a secret ballot election to decide whether or not the Teamsters would remain in their workplace. And once the Teamsters saw the petition, saw the majority, instead of standing for an election, which I think they were pretty sure they were going to lose, they just walked away. They said, hey, we don't want to represent these people anymore. And so they walked away. So that's a victory. However, not too long ago, a couple months ago, we were working with drivers, again, Teamster union represented workers in the Keurig Dr. Pepper business up in Wisconsin. They contacted us about a decertification election, and we helped them walk through that process, and they won, again, throwing the Teamster union out of their workplace so that they could talk to their employer directly as opposed to through a third party. And in both of these cases, Matt, these are employees that talk about, hey, the union's not representing us, the union doesn't care about us, the union, there's no accountability. These are kind of the anecdotes that come out of these types of battles, and over the last rolling 12 months, we've had over 130 of these decertification actions that our attorneys have helped employees with across the country, and a large number of them are in Michigan and Wisconsin.
Yes, and that brings up a good point. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee, joining us in the Vicki McKenna Show with yours truly, Matt Kittle, on this Monday. How important is it to be a right-to-work state, which Wisconsin became, I believe, the 25th, if my memory serves me, and it doesn't often, but if my memory serves me, Wisconsin became the 25th right-to-work state, signed into law by Governor Scott Walker at the time in 2015. How much does being a right-to-work state play in these decertification efforts?
Well, it really helps because, one of the things that happens in a state that doesn't have a right to work law is the union officials can tell you, hey, Matt, you've got to pay us $1,000 a year or you don't work. Whether you're the best worker or the worst worker, if you don't pay, you don't work. In the right to work states, the 26 states that have them, including Wisconsin, and your memory's good, Matt, so I guess maybe we are getting older, but you're still young in the mind. 2015, Wisconsin became a right to work state and said that, you can associate with the union if you want to. You can join a union if you want to. You can give your entire paycheck to the union if you want to, but you can't lose your job if you don't. And so from a standpoint of individual freedom, that's a really important protection. And it's one, frankly, that allows employees to hold union officials accountable in the workplace. Because if they're doing something you don't like, whether it be politically or ideologically or from a representation standpoint, you can withhold your money. That makes sense everywhere else in America except for labor policy imposed on us almost 100 years ago at the federal level.
Boy, Mark, if you're not seeing just how much money big labor is pumping into political causes and on the left, almost exclusively on the left, you're just, I don't know if there's any time in America you're paying less attention, because that's, when he became president of the United States, that's what Joe Biden said, that he was going to be the union's president, basically. I don't remember exactly the turn of phrase, but that was the spirit of what he said. now these nearly 3.5 years later, how much more dominant are unions in America under the pro-union Biden watch?
Yeah, well, Matt, what he did say, he was going to be the most pro-union president in American history. And what he really meant to say was he's going to be the most pro-forced unionism president in American history, because his policies, his actions, and they've all been kind of executive branch actions, have benefited the top bosses of big labor, not the rank and file workers. And you and I have talked about this before. You know, if you look at what's happened to the rank and file, the blue collar workers to honor Sticks, in that whatever that was, you said it was this river to hell or whatever.
River to Hades, that's right.
Yeah, it's not helping the rank and file workers across the country, and they're responding. You know, when you have a president, a UAW president by the name of Shawn Fain, who their 14-member executive committee issues an endorsement for Joe Biden, and then he goes on TV the next day and says, and I quote, "Let me be clear, the great majority of our members are not going to be voting for Joe Biden. You know that the privileges and powers doled out by the Biden administration and currently that exist in federal law going back to the 1930s, as I mentioned, is benefiting a very elite group of political activists, and that is organized labor bosses here in Washington, D.C. They're benefiting, but the rest of America, I mean, they're suffering through inflation, high gas prices, all the other things that are happening, just like ordinary Americans are that are not affiliated with the union." So he's making good on that promise. That's one of the few things he's delivered on that he talked about, but it's really empowering union officials over rank and file workers.
Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee, joining us on the Vicki McKenna Show, and that raises a good point. How often do you, in the right to work advocacy realm, how often do you hear from employees saying, you know what, I am so sick and tired of my money that's supposed to be going to improve my wages, improve my personal existence in the workforce, it's going to support far left causes. And you name the far left cause du jour, you know, that the worker says, I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm putting in people in power who have made, you know, my standard of living drop over the last 3.5 years.
Yeah, Matt, that's probably the most common argument against what union officials are doing, whether it be school teachers or firefighters or police officers or steel workers or truck drivers. They talk about the political agenda, the radical political agenda of the top elites of the union officialdom, but they disagree. We have a case. I was down in New Orleans on Monday of last week at a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals case on behalf of a flight attendant from Southwest Airlines who did nothing but argue with her union president over the political views of the Transportation Workers Union local down there that represents her and the rest of the Southwest employees who are flight attendants. And they were using their money to come to Washington to march in radical, you know, the Planned Parenthood supported parades and all that. And this private conversation between a union official and a rank and file worker who they claim to represent ended up in a harassment charge to the company that fired this 25-year Southwest employee flight attendant who had not a single blemish in her employment record. Her only crime was arguing with her union official that she was forced to pay as a condition of employment about the political views that the union was taking with her money, that she had to pay or she would lose her job.
That is just astounding, and I'm sure it's not the only story like that you've encountered. Just a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to ask you this. You know, this is the big movement time, as it comes every year at this time, for Supreme Court decisions. In recent years, you've had some very interesting decisions and some big wins on the worker freedom front. Are you seeing any court decisions coming out before the Supreme Court breaks for the summer that will have major implications for worker freedom?
Yeah, well, one thing that we're watching, I think a lot of other people are watching for lots of other reasons, is the Chevron deference case. And that's the idea that the bureaucracy has basically taken liberties with the statutory framework that Congress has presented to them. You know, we had an EPA case versus West Virginia, I think it was 2 terms ago, that started to limit and kind of constrain what the agencies and bureaucracies could do with statutes. The National Labor Relations Board has gone bat guana crazy over regulations favoring union officials. officials and favoring the power of union officials to keep workers inside of unions, keep them compliant, keeping them paid union dues. In fact, this Mercedes case, the vote against the UAW at the Mercedes case in Alabama, it looks like the NLRB will probably step in, and while the employees voted overwhelmingly against unionization, may step in and impose a union on those workers despite the outcome of the secret ballot election. So that's an important case.
That is an extremely important case, and here's the $1 million question for you. If I had $1 million, I'd put it on the line. No, I wouldn't, because I'd like to keep that $1 million. Where do you think the court will ultimately rule in this over what I think to be is an abuse of power from the executive branch?
Yeah, well, I hope that the triggers in the past are indicators of the future. I think they may try to rein it in. Whether they, how far they go in that's another question. The court tends to look at things in bits and pieces and oftentimes separates it that way. But I think it's an important case, and the reason why it's important is because the out-of-control bureaucracy is showing itself now in a very, very dramatic way across all elements of our business community, our environmental community, and frankly, the American workplace. It's an amazing power that union officials and bureaucrats in the government have used to expand what power that was beyond the statute. And so I think it's important they rein it in. I mean, Kavanaugh's written about it in his previous role as an appeals court judge. I think Gorsuch has written a little bit about it. So there may be a 5 or 6 vote majority there that may say, you know what, let's take another look at this and clean up the bureaucracy's kind of runaway interpretation of statutes.
We will be watching, as always. Much obliged for your time today. There he is. He's my young friend, Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee. Hey, we're not old, we're experienced, right, my friend?
There you go. Yeah. Thank you, Matt.
Good to talk to you. Take care. Yep, indeed. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee, a 2.8 million member public policy organization.